Well, folks, Conference USA spun the wheel of the conference realignment carousel once again with the announcement last week that the University of Delaware will be joining the conference in 2025. This is a little unexpected, and it created a fair amount of buzz. But quite honestly, it's been a long time coming. Delaware has a 135-year history in college football and a rich tradition of winning. So let's take it through the paces of its impact and see what it might mean for college athletics, Conference USA, and the university. I'd love to share with you why I continue to have a lot of optimism for Conference USA and get excited at how the Group of Five conferences will continue to innovate in order to not just survive, but thrive in the ever-changing future of college football. Pete Thamel broke the news early last week on 11/28, followed by the official press conference at the University of Delaware the following day. Now, this guy is an expert at getting the scoop on college football realignment. He's been the center of a lot of the scoops, if you will. If there's a realignment news, Pete seems to always have the hook. Kudos to him for building his credibility and his brand over his career. So if you're trying to speculate college football realignment, you got to listen to Pete. He's usually on point. So here's a look at the intended future of Conference USA footprint. Now, I've seen a lot of comments on the YouTube sphere sharing that UD looks like it's outside of the CUSA geography, which I personally think is an absolute joke. I mean, historically, the conference has been within the same distance of mileage for most of its existence, hence the name Conference USA. The future look of Conference USA is just about the same as the Sun Belt or even the American Athletic Conference, which is really made up of a bunch of previous members of Conference USA. I'll follow up a little bit more on this later. You know, there was a lot of doom and gloom talk when conference realignment handed CUSA a near death nail in 2021. But if you remember, when CUSA was down to 5 members and seemingly looking just to survive, Conference Commissioner Judy McLeod shared that they had over 20-plus conversations with interested schools, and they made very deliberate and strategic invites that quite honestly has paid off this year in its first year of existence. For instance, 3 of the 4 new members that were invited to Conference USA took the top 3 spots in the football standings this year, with Liberty being undefeated in the regular season, taking the conference championship and garnering a number 23 ranking. New Mexico State was 10-4, best year in history with Coach Kerry Kill, and Jacksonville State, first year in the league, 8-4 with a storied coach like Rich Rodriguez. And then, as we know, Kennesaw State will enter next year. And the University of Delaware is poised to bring good competition since they're in the FCS playoffs this year and have a great tradition of good football. Now, the move comes at a costly price for UD, having to be the first school to have to pay the 1,000% increase in transfer fees from $5,000 to $5 million. Fundraising will be needed as they extend for more sports teams to fulfill the Title IX requirement, as well as facilities. And they have to find new homes for field hockey and lacrosse, which are some of the best in the country. As a move right now, I wonder if they thought this could potentially get a lot more expensive in the future, and we'd better do it now before things get out of hand. So why now? Why is now the right time for UD? According to Chrissy Rawak, Delaware's longtime athletic director, she stated among the reasons that the current state of college football realignment or conference realignment really has played into that, given that things are shifting all the time. She also said that they had the resources, and there's several reports that plans for facility upgrades to their stadium are already in flight. She said that they have the focus and they finally feel ready to compete immediately. And then, of course, the opportunity. Remember, a school has to be invited to a conference that's currently playing FBS football. And it may have been that there really wasn't an open invite opportunity like there is now with the Conference USA. And the fact that they feel ready. So it sounds to me like the stars finally aligned and it's almost a no-brainer. That's always a great position to be in when you're making high-stakes decisions. It's very exciting. If you're not familiar with the history of Delaware football, this move has been talked about for decades. Delaware's been playing FBS opponents since the beginning of the division itself and playing football since 1889. They'll be rejoining some of their former conference partners that played previously in FCS, who are now in FBS action. So take a look at their record against some of these current FBS competitors. For instance, Navy, which is really just down the road, could be a great rival. 8-10 isn't bad against a team like Navy. They're 21-12 against Temple. It seems a little bit lopsided, Temple being in the American, James Madison, who's made a great splash in their first few years here in FBS play, they actually have a pretty good rivalry from the CAA. And so I think that'll be great to rekindle, even though they'll be in a different conference in the Sun Belt there. They're 1-1 with Old Dominion. 13-16 against Rutgers isn't bad. Rutgers is one of the, basically the first college football team. So UD has a great tradition and history, much like Rutgers. And them coming up to the FBS, like I said, it's not even almost like they're coming up. It's more like they're just kind of taking their rightful place, if you will. UConn and UMass, which right now are kind of down, but they're still ahead in those series, right? So, and then of course, if you take a look at their record against current or future CUSA opponents, they're basically 4-0. So this is a really great opportunity for them. They're ready and they're poised to make an impact right away. Unpacking the data behind Delaware here, you can see that they've got an enrollment of about 23,000, which really puts them in middle of the pack, maybe top tier for Conference USA. One of the most, I think, lucrative things from a conference and exposure standpoint here is that they are in the largest TV market in the future of Conference USA. With number 4, they're basically in the Philly TV market, which is huge for sports, huge for exposure, huge for all that things. So it really pays off for Conference USA as well as for Delaware being able to be seen on that bigger stage. Their average attendance, now I got this, is 14,000. I think it's actually a little higher than that in the last year, but I think this was from 2019 stats. That would put them, pretty, middle of the pack, but top tier, middle of the pack for Conference USA. Again, the closest competitor or opponent for Conference USA is Liberty. Now, I talk a lot about their history and their storied tradition of good football at UD. Here's some of the things that you can unpack. They've had at least 18 postseason experiences in the FCS, right? They won a national title in 2003. They've been a runner-up 3 times. Their playoff record is 25-17. So, this is a good, not just a good football team, it's a great football team at that level. And as I've mentioned before, let's face it, let's say the top 15 FCS teams could probably beat the bottom 25 of the FBS at any given time. And not just beat them, but compete and beat them consistently. So, again, this is really just UD taking its rightful place in the history of college football. Adding on to that, right, they've got 6 national titles at various levels, but they have a lot of titles in football itself. And, they match up really well with the incoming FCS teams that are upgrading to CUSA. Good examples, Sam Houston State, Jacksonville State, those kinds of teams. Now, I talked earlier about how UD's footprint or how the Conference USA footprint, a lot of people are saying that UD is outside of that. It kind of kills me to say that. Yeah, it's sure today in the CAA they could probably have a lot more drive to games. But if you look at the travel time between the schools, and I'll show a graph on that later, or at least a slide on that later, the time travel is comparable. The difference is that they're going to have to fly as opposed to drive, right? And so whether it's flying or driving, I don't know that people care that much, except for obviously cost is a little bit more for sure. The other great thing, I talked about that TV market too, is like they're in the Philly TV market, but they're not far from Baltimore. They're not far from DC. There's a lot of exposure there. There are a lot of opportunities to play kind of in-state or sort of regional rivals at the FBS level. And, not to forget, I've focused on football, but they have a lot of great nationally ranked teams. A good example is the women's volleyball team this year. They made it to the tourney. It's absolutely an opportunity for Delaware to elevate its profile, if you will, its exposure or brand to the rest of the country. So here's that chart that I was telling you about where we get the breakdown of the schools or the numbers across the board. If you look at the enrollment, UD's right in there, right in line with Middle Tennessee, New Mexico, Sam Houston State, UTEP. It's really, actually, it's a little bit bigger than those. So it's going to be one of the biggest schools in the conference. The TV market, it's going to be the number one TV market, meaning the largest at number 4. The stadium is totally acceptable. It's funny, they're not enforcing the, what do they call that? They're not enforcing the attendance records anymore, which is kind of crazy. I don't really get that. They used to have this rule in FBS that you had to have a minimum of 16,000 average per year. I think it was every 2 years, right? So, but they've gone away with that. The UD Stadium is pretty good size, 18.5, and I think the minimum size for a stadium used to be 16,000. So they already beat that. They don't need to do upgrades, but of course, as it's been rumored, it sounds like they've already got that in the plans. So, but it's right in line with all of those other stadiums that are in CUSA. Looks like a good fit. They've got 21 programs, and they got to find some athletic programs. They got to find some homes for some of their other sports, like field hockey, that kind of a thing. And then, of course, there's a lot of mentionables with the other. I mean, CUSA is a really pretty good fit for UD. And I think Conference USA is really going to be benefited by UD as well. Here's that distance mileage calculator that I was talking about earlier, where if you look at the footprint of the Sun Belt Conference and the footprint of the American Conference, Conference USA really isn't that much bigger. If you look Army to UTSA, that's about 1,800 miles. Conference USA is going to have a little bit further. I think the largest or the furthest distance is New Mexico State to UD is 2,000 miles. I think at the end of the day, one of the things that we're seeing in the future of FBS is that basically, if you're playing FBS football or at the FBS level in these types of conferences, you're going to be required to fly. There are very few regional conferences left. I mean, the MAC maybe. Sun Belt, look at that. That's pretty regional, but still, the footprint's pretty large. And, I think it's just a reality. So when people say that UD's outside the geographic footprint of Conference USA, it's not really being extended that much. So what does it mean for college football, right? What's the trickle-down effect? To me, this is actually a pretty good departure for UD, for Conference USA, and then even for CAA football. If you look at the teams that they've got together for the football league, they're losing one team. They're going to go down to 13. I think it's 13, yeah. And it's not a huge impact. Yes, of course, it's an impact because they're a good team and they're going to lose some of the regional rivalries. But I think CEA is okay. They could replace them if they wanted to. They probably don't really have to. I don't expect this impact to really trickle down even further. So why 11? I mean, Conference USA is at 10. You'd think it would be, let's split less money among less members, and that would be more advantageous. But if you think back all the way back to when they were inviting schools, they were very deliberate about what they were looking for. And then, of course, they were being very strategic about the schools that they put into the conference. I think that the fact is that Conference USA is not done with the invitations for a couple of reasons, right? So I doubt that they'll stay at 11, but there are a lot of changes to anticipate in the future. For example, the conference realignment carousel just keeps spinning. It is never ending. We're going to be talking about this probably for the future indefinitely, right? In fact, I was listening to the podcast Head Coach U, which is hosted by former Virginia head coach and BYU head coach Bronco Mendenhall. He had the conference commissioner of the Mountain West Conference on there, Gloria Nevarez, and she was sharing that, hey, at their media rights for Mountain West are going to end in 2026. That means they're going to go to market in 2025 and try to broker a new deal. And she was saying, when she became commissioner, she thought, they've got quite a few schools in the Mountain West. And of course, there's always talk about whether or not Oregon State and Washington State will join them. They seem like a good fit. But she was saying, even now, if they lose one school, they may not be in a good position these days. One move tends to be a lot of trickle-down effect for lots of people. And SDSU, San Diego State, has made it very clear to the Mountain West Conference that, they'd like to try to make it into a Power 5 conference. We'll call it's probably Power 3 at this point, right? And then with the dissolution of the Pac-12, then that kind of kept it so that they'll stay there. But, if they do lose any more schools, it's very possible schools like, say, UTEP or New Mexico State, if they consistently stay good, could be invited to the Mountain West, which would make it better as a regional fit for them, And then Conference USA will then probably have to go looking for another two. But the fact is, conference realignment is here with us to stay. We're going to be talking about this for a long time. There's schools like there's the conference, the new United Conference, which is the partnership between the ASUN and the WAC, and all their football teams are together. That could be interesting if they step up as well. So I don't think they're intending to stay at 11. They're looking at this for the future. There's going to be more news to come. And they'll just add schools based on the criteria that they've discovered. In fact, if you want to hear a great clip about why UD was chosen for Conference USA, I would say go over to the press conference where Judy McLeod made the announcement at University of Delaware as to why they invited him to the conference. You could say why 11. I talked a little bit about how Conference USA is not done. Part of the reason they're not done is, quite honestly, they have a lot of dynamic and interesting teams in the Conference USA today. Liberty, they're ranked 23. They're undefeated. They're going to a New Year's Six Bowl. Can you believe that's kind of crazy? And quite honestly, if you look at the charter for Liberty University, Jerry Falwell, who was the chancellor and started the school, I don't know, maybe 50 years ago, 35, 50 years ago, at the very beginning, at the outset of that school, he said that it's our plan to have the athletic program comparable to anybody. And he named names like Notre Dame and things like that. So Liberty has their sights set on rising to the very top. And my expectation is if they do any better than they're doing now, or consistently do better than what they're doing today, that they'll find themselves in maybe a higher conference, or maybe a P5 conference, P3, whatever we're going to call it these days. But I expect any of these teams to be rising to step into different conferences. So Conference USA is, it's funny, again, back in 2021, everybody kind of thought the death nail was them, and they kind of, dropped the ball. But it sounds to me like they're actually being avant-garde. They're looking out ahead of things and really being proactive about what they need to do. But they invited UD. It's a good spot for them. It's a good time. And let's face it, it's insurance for the league is to really keep it competitive. So let's talk about the future then. Who might be the 12? Who knows? Maybe they'll go to 14. Maybe they'll come back down to 10 because some of those schools will leave. And I've done this speculation on every bit of news that we've had for Conference USA. I've updated my predictions a little bit. I mean, this was my grid before when Conference USA was down to 5. This is fascinating to me that I thought a long shot, I thought UD was a long shot. But when you hear Judy McLeod talk about their criteria when it comes to, by the way, one thing I forgot to say was UD is an R1 research university, right? That's high academic achievement. And so that's always lucrative and really interesting for schools to want to be associated with that. So that's one of the other reasons UD was invited. So when you think about that and the things that Conference USA is looking for, again, they had over 20 plus discussions with schools, and they only made a few invites. They didn't make like a zillion just to keep things alive, So I still think the top tier has to be somebody like a Chattanooga who's got sustained success, a lot like the profile of Delaware, sustained success at the FCS level. Maybe a McNeese State who, they've stated very clearly they want to play FBS football. It's just about the right timing. They remain in the Southland. Eastern Kentucky definitely wants in. They really want to step into that same spot, and it might be interesting to have Eastern Kentucky and Western Kentucky in the same conference. Central Arkansas, they're an FCS power. Austin Peay And I personally would love to see North Carolina A&T step into the FBS level. I think a little bit like UD, they've got all the pieces there. They don't really need to change anything. I don't know what's stopping, except for maybe, they just need some time and see. I think they just moved to the CAA, right? So I've heard a lot of people talk about speculation from Missouri State. I still have that on my tier 2 because I really don't know that much about them. But within that footprint, you've got Southern Illinois. And then, of course, the footprint we've got in Conference USA with FIU down in Miami, it'd be great to round out some Florida teams like Bethune-Cookman or Florida A&M. Jacksonville, Jackson State and Mississippi might be interesting too. I'd love to see some of those HBCUs kind of step into the other thing. So previously I had Youngstown State on there kind of as a long shot. And then I think a lot of people would love to see NDSU or South Dakota State join any conference in the FBS level. I really don't see them joining Conference USA. I think talk about geographic outliers, that is it. They would have to bring a lot more to the table than just amazing football to be in that conference. My expectation is at some point the Mountain West is going to show up for them. Here's a map that kind of shows what we just talked about. The dark circles show the schools that are now slated to be in Conference USA. You can see if we were talking North Dakota State and South Dakota State, it's off the map here, but they're really, really outside this footprint. And, the furthest outliers here are New Mexico State and UTEP, and they've got them built in as travel partners, right? You're going to go to one, you're going to fly to one, you're going to do both, and then make efficiency that trip. So that makes them almost a package deal, which makes it worth it. I didn't talk about any of the extra Texas schools like Stephen F. Austin and Tarleton State. Part of the reason I didn't put them in there was because, they're in the United Football League, and the United Football League stated that their goal as a conference was to rise all together as a conference from FCS to FBS. And so I think, they had Sam Houston State in the WAC before then. And when Sam Houston left for Conference USA, I can't remember who it was, but definitely one of the ADs of one of the schools that were in the WAC said, look, the juice just wasn't in the room anymore to really expedite that move from FCS for the whole of the league to FBS. So I think the United Football League, their goal is still to rise to FBS, but it's probably going to take a little more time. Now, if those Texas schools do get anxious and they get an invite, we may see them jump in. But I didn't even put them in on the long shot because I'm really sort of banking on the fact that they're in it to win it in the United Football Conference. Now, earlier I talked a little bit about my excitement for Conference USA. It kind of cracks me up. I think a lot of people see Conference USA as down and out on its luck. I thought that they really did have a vision for how they, one, might rebuild, and two, how do they thrive in the current landscape of college football where everything's being tipped upside down, from NIL to conference realignment to the possibility of top-tier FBS teams and lower-tier FBS teams and revenue generation. What does that mean? I mean, look at what happened this year. It actually became one of the most exciting conferences to watch. I found myself watching Conference USA even more than, say, the Big 12 or even the SEC, right? So Liberty was exciting to watch. They had a run game, but they had some really exciting players there. The Aggies with Jerry Kill as their coach. Think about this. You've got Rich Rodriguez, who's the head coach of JSU, Jacksonville State. I mean, he's a storied coach. You've got Jerry Kill, who's basically the fix-it king, right? He knows how to fix programs and bring them back to prominence. In his second year, they went 10-4. It's their best record ever. They played for the conference championship. They got beat, but I don't know if you watched that conference championship game. That was exciting. Man, that was an exciting game. That was fun to watch. It's not just like it's just, the perennial pillow fight of the week, It was pretty fun to watch. And I would say it's as fun to watch as any other big conference because the level of play was matched and it was pretty exciting. Actually, it was just playing good play of football. There are some exciting catches, some exciting runs, and just some really cool schemes that they put together. So I think it's a really fun conference to watch. I think, people are going to be surprised as to just how entertaining this will be. 4 out of the 5 teams that they have in the current conference are going to bowl games, right? So anybody at 6-6 or their lowest bowl entry is 7-5, Western Kentucky. And, they're able to fill all their bowl slots because Liberty then merited a New Year's Six bowl. Now, of course, there's a lot of chicanery and craziness going on with CFP and who deserves to be there. There's definitely a little bit of corruption there for sure. But at the end of the day, you couldn't ignore an undefeated team. I think it's really cool. It's kind of exciting. I think there's a lot to be held for the Conference USA, and I encourage anyone to watch those games and see what they got to offer. So take a look at Conference USA. Now, with even more competition with UD coming in 2025, they definitely are the conference who's rising from the ashes like a phoenix.